So this is a local concerns meeting for Bridge 55, US Route 5 over the Mill Brook. I'm sure you guys are all very well aware of where the project is. So I'm Laura Stone. I'm the VTrans scoping engineer. We also have JB McCarthy. He's going to be the design project manager after this project moves out of scoping and into the design phase. He's not here with us tonight, but he will be at the next meeting. Kyle Obenauer should be zooming in shortly, but he is the VTrans Historic Preservation Officer. We hired a design consultant, HNTB, to do the scoping and design of the bridge. So we have Rich Tatro with us tonight. He's the project manager on the HNTB side. And we also have Angela Kingsley. She's the lead bridge engineer. She might be joining us via Zoom as well. So this is just an outline of the discussion. We're going to give an introduction to the project, talk about the VTrans project development process and where we are right now in that process. We want to talk about the existing conditions of the bridge. We did go out there and do a detailed inspection and testing of the concrete out there. So Rich will talk about the findings. Historic factors. Obviously, this structure is historically significant. And so this project does use 80% federal funds. Well, typically it's 80% federal funds, 10% town funds, and 10% state funds. Per Act 153 of the 2012 legislative session, by rehabilitating a bridge, the town share is reduced by 50%, and by closing the road to traffic during construction, it's reduced an additional 50%. So that brings the town share down to 2.5% potentially. But because there is that 80% federal funds involved, there are stipulations of how we can use those funds on a historic structure. And then really why we're here tonight, the local concerns. We want to get the concerns of the community needs. So as we develop alternatives for this project, we can make the most informed decision. So project introduction, why are we here? So the project location, it is located, it's that green circle right there. I think you guys are all familiar where it is, but just south of Bridge Street on US Route 5 over the Mill Brook. I'm not going to talk too much about traffic control, but we can bring it up as one of the concerns at the end of the meeting. But really the formal state signed detour here would be detouring traffic onto I-89 between exits 8 and 9. 91. Sorry, 91. Between exits 8 and exits 9, though. Yeah. And then and there is this local detour available. So there are routes around. So it is something for the town to consider. Again, you do get a 50% reduction in share if you close the bridge to traffic during construction. So the purpose and need of the project. So when we have a historic bridge, it is really important to develop the purpose and need and have a purpose and need that we can find a project that meets the needs. Really the purpose of this project is to provide a safe crossing of Mill Brook for the traveling public, including pedestrians and bicycles, and to address the current structural deficiencies and ongoing deterioration of the bridge. Next, we have the need, recognizing the importance of the historic setting in the community where the bridge is located, focus on the options to rehabilitate and extend the useful life of the concrete spandrel arch to the extent practical in concert with providing safe passage to all users. Another part of the need down there is just community needs, ? And again, that's really why we're here tonight, is to hear what the community needs are for this structure. So the VTrans process. So this is a really high level high-level timeline of our project development process. So a project's been funded, and we're in this stage called project definition. This is where we identify the cultural and environmental resources. We evaluate the condition of the bridge. We look at the constraints surrounding the bridge. Part of that is why we're here tonight, is gathering local concerns and needs for the project. After this meeting, we evaluate alternatives. From that, we'll have a scoping report with alternatives and costs associated with those. There will be another public participation piece as part of that prior to moving into design. So there will be another opportunity to give some consensus. We really want to build consensus towards a project. After that project will be defined, that's when we'll really move into design, start developing plans, estimates, specifications. That's when we'll get our environmental permitting, our historic permitting, quantifying the areas of impact. And then we will move into contract award. So really this slide is just to show you that we're at an extremely early stage of project development. And this is kind of just zooming in where we are right now. So again, we need to develop a scoping report. We've done some structural evaluation, as-built load ratings, as inspected load ratings. We've done an existing conditions evaluation. So we had a team go out there and take concrete cores and do concrete testing. Rich will talk a little bit more about that. And we have this project definition piece. So we need to be developing the purpose and need, have this stakeholder engagement. And really where we are after that is alternatives analysis and traffic control considerations with cost estimates. So the next step after this is we're going to evaluate alternatives, develop a scoping report. We're going to present the town with several alternatives that will have costs associated with them.
Great. So greetings, everyone. We're going to talk through what's out there currently and what we've seen over the past few months. We'll get right into the slides. What's unique here is the type of structure. It's a concrete spandrel arch. And for the state of Vermont, there have only been 3 of them constructed within the state of Vermont. And this is the last one still standing and in service. And for assorted reasons, the other 2 are no longer in service. There is one over the Connecticut River that some of you might know in Bellows Falls, the Vilas Bridge, and that one is closed. The only thing it services currently is some utilities, but that one's certainly up for discussion as well on the other side of the river. So looking at this one, it's 95 years old. And we have the span length there, and you look at the type of truck that it was designed for back in the day. And we'll talk more on what we design for in today's terms when we're engineering bridges. And then looking at some of the components, the main part that you look at is an arch. That's called the arch rib. We'll get into more details on what we see on each component. We have the columns, and then the cross beams on top of the columns are floor beams. And then on top of the floor beams is a deck, which essentially you drive on. Back when it was built in 1930, there wasn't asphalt pavement used back in those days, so it was a bare concrete deck. But in 43, you see that's where a rehab project was developed to put on the asphalt wearing.
Just a second. If anybody wants to move the chairs around this way, I'll try to tilt the screen a little bit. I don't know how well you can see when you're getting back that way. You can.
It's just like,
Oh,
better? Yeah.
Can you see it?
I can. Thank you.
Okay.
And, I'm happy to be working with the agency on this. I actually had a full career with the agency and with my team that we've assembled. It's fortunate in that they've done work on these types of bridges across the country. So they're very familiar with the uniqueness of them, the types of materials, how to assess their remaining life, et cetera, which we'll get into more detail field recently. And Angela, who just joined us, you may have seen in the initial slide, she is our lead bridge engineer on the project. Okay, next slide, Rich. I'll do that. What are the services provided by the bridge? There's about 2,000 vehicles on average per day crossing this bridge, with 6% being truck traffic. It does have pedestrians on the sidewalk. For utilities, there is an abandoned water line that is reportedly no longer needed. The alternate route is all that is needed currently. And the utility bank on the upstream side, we know has consolidated communications. We've got to determine yet what other utilities are in those banks. When looking at the Agency of Transportation by federal requirement looks at these bridges at a minimum every 24 years, 24 months. This is on a 24-month cycle. You can see it was last done by the agency in 23. They'll be doing another one around August of 25 of this year. Looking at the condition ratings, the ratings of the deck, superstructure, substructure, channel, that's walking down in the structure. I did it in reverse order for you with the ribs and columns, but the rating system is 0 to 9, with 9 being like new condition and 0 is nothing that would be remaining open. So you're somewhere in the middle here, and you can see by the description, the worst case scenario is fair with the deck, and the other ones do have satisfactory ratings. That being said, our more in-depth inspection and analysis will show you those areas that certainly need some area of attention. And then we look at appraisal ratings for certain features. These aren't condition ratings. These are just based on what's out there for compared to today's standards. The big one there is the railing system, though it looks pretty hefty, the concrete system. It does have some deterioration, but most importantly, it has never been tested and doesn't meet current standards. So that's something we need to weigh when we get into the final design work. Assessment. This WJE is a sub-consultant that is they're like chemists and analysts. They really understand concrete. Over time, being 95 years old in its early life, the structure didn't see de-icing salts on the highways. They weren't utilized, but more recently, it certainly has experienced that, and we'll show you the results of that environment. But without getting into all the details, it's critically important that we really do assess if we're going to invest in a structure such as this, what is its remaining useful life? How has the concrete been durable over the years or not so durable? So we've done a preliminary assessment, and we'll get into some of the details on that and how it may impact, how it will influence how we move forward. One of the things they certainly did, assessing the deck surface, the soundings, and you can see some red areas where they found areas of what we call delamination, where the concrete, at least on the top, is sounding where it's not solid any longer. One critical point on this bridge is it does have expansion joints built into the deck at the 1/3 length, and it's, in the asphalt overlay, there is what's called a plug joint, and we'll show you the results of. It's essentially was an open joint for many years, and when that joint deteriorates, more water and salt does travel through it. So we'll show you the results of that. And here's the railing system again. It does have areas of deterioration, and it doesn't meet the current crash standards. There is a sidewalk on the upstream side. Now we look underneath the deck on the sides, what we call the fascias. Water has filled around the sides over the years, and the de-icing salts have, attacked the ends of the floor beams and the underside of the deck. And then in the interior, more than likely in those areas of delamination that we sounded in the top, there are some areas of what we call spalling and reinforcing steel exposed in the deck. All things being said, it's still rated a 5. In other words, you're safe to cross this bridge. Don't make it, it's not to dictate that, oh, this is terrible, but it does, demonstrate the useful life in that deck is pretty much been seen. And then walking down in reverse, how I did earlier, back down to the ribs. These are those components that I'll show that we looked at in subsequent slides here. So with the floor beams, this one is directly under one of the joints. So there's two floor beams in this condition with the two joints being present, and they've been certainly attacked over years by the chlorides. We've tested the rebar. The rebar is remarkable. They'll have some soundness to it, but the useful life in those two floor beams is certainly exhausted. And then the columns, remarkably, they do have, fairly good-looking conditions. They do have some random areas of deterioration that certainly needs to be assessed as we move forward. And in a slide a little later, there are trade-offs. Once you open up this bridge, if the rehab is a alternative, then you've got to weigh which components are actually worth saving, considering you're going to remove a component above it. So there's some constructability issues as well as durability issues that come into play when we're assessing a rehab option. The ribs, remarkably, for the most part, are quite good when you look at types of assessments that were done by the concrete experts. That being said, there are some areas that have been patched in the past, even that have been attacked by different methods of deterioration. We believe that, first preliminary assessment is those arches, even in the deterior areas, are likely able to be salvaged and rehabilitated and utilized. I mentioned before that little short bridge back in the truck in the 1930s called the H-15 was the design vehicle. These are the vehicles that we consider now, and Angela has all the know-how to run these trucks through models over structure like this. It's rather unique, and to assess what are the load carrying capacity of the existing elements, not like new and also in their deteriorated state. With that, we do know that it certainly, it was designed for H-15. So ultimately, these are heavier trucks nowadays. The design truck of HL93 doesn't meet the load carrying capacity for the deck, floor beams, and some of the arches. It's something to look at. The arches could be potentially addressed with a new deck and floor beam system that distributes the load a little bit differently. So, the deck and floor beams, though, are ones that their ability to carry anything of today's loading is not there. And that second bullet talks also about the deteriorated state of some of the floor beams that are impacting the EV load as well, emergency vehicle. But again, we have to weigh all these with the alternatives and what members would stay and which ones would be strengthened to meet current loads today. And I'm going to hand it off to Kyle now. Kyle, I'll hit the slide when you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Obenauer. And, as Rich just showed us, it's the bridge needs some work. Moving forward as this project evolves, as we look closer at the purpose and need and what alternatives might best to meet the purpose and need for the project, one thing that we do have to consider with projects like this that utilize federal funding are, if you go to the next slide, Rich, for me, please, is really the environmental review and permitting. Those are sort of the strings that are attached to federal funding for these bridge projects. And, as Rich also mentioned, this is the last open spandrel reinforced arch in Vermont. So when we are considering alternatives for the project, that sort of sets the bar a little higher. And essentially, some of those strings I mentioned are Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and Section 4F, which apply specifically to projects like this that are funded by the Federal Highway Administration. And essentially, what both of these laws, their intent is basically to avoid and minimize impacts to cultural resources. So that includes archaeology and our historic resources. So the bridge itself is historically significant. Obviously, it's the last one we have in Vermont. The setting is within a historic district, and of course, there's the National Historic Landmark directly adjacent to the bridge, the American Precision Museum, which is, you know, one of only 18 National Historic Landmarks we have in Vermont, up there with the Vermont State House and Shelburne Farms. So all that's to say, we really need to consider how a project alternative might impact the setting that we're in and the bridge itself. And that's essentially what the historic review will do as part of this project. It will essentially, you know, we have to balance the purpose and need of the project with those potential impacts to the bridge itself and those adjacent historic properties, including the historic district and the American Precision Museum. So moving forward, that will be part of the discussion. Thanks, Rich. That's sort of my quick overview.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation piece. Before I open it up for, you know, hearing the town's input and concerns, we do have this link that's at the bottom of the page here. And that's a public facing link where all future presentations for the project will be put on that link. Design submissions and design plans will be put at that link. So that's just a place that the public can follow the project. So we have some bullets here to kind of get the room talking. We want to hear about how the town feels about the historic context, maintenance of traffic and detours, the bridge width, snow removal equipment, the bridge usage from bikes and pedestrians, bridge usage from cars, trucks, emergency, construction, utility vehicles. Are there any local events that we should be considering as it relates to traffic control? Safety concerns related to the intersection off North End, and any other concerns. I guess I'll open it up for, sure, go ahead.
Sorry, I came in a bit late. What is the estimated timeline of the project? Like when is construction supposed to start and how long is the construction phase going to be roughly?
Yeah, so we're really early in the project development process right now. I would assume around 2030 for construction. And in terms of how long it would take in construction, I would assume an entire construction season.
Would that be a full closure of the bridge for one season or one lane? Not sure yet.
I guess not sure yet. Angela might be able to speak better about how long a closure would be. Caught her off guard. I mean, at this point, I think assume it could be a construction duration. So that's like.
Hey, sorry, Laura. I was trying to find the mute button. I apologize. So I would say that we would probably be looking at a full closure, most likely, for the deck replacement and the floor beam replacements that we have to do. Just because it's always possible to do something, but I think it's best when we have we have a 2-rib system with 2 columns and then the floor beams that go transversely. Temporary works in that case would be required to support traffic if we went part width. So for the safety of the public and to give the contractor the most working space possible, we would do a full width project and want to be fully closed. And then from there, I think the extent of what we choose to do would indicate the duration, but I would assume at least a full season.
So that season in Vermont, that runs April 15th to, or April 30th? April 15th to October 15th. So
Yep.
That's kind of the worst case scenario, I would say.
Where are they going to stockpile their stuff to work on the bridge for?
That's a good question. That's ultimately up to the contractor. If we do have a closure, there's a potential that they could stockpile some things in the approaches of the bridge. But they'll take a look and see what makes sense to them. That is something that we leave up to the contractor.
And if they shut off this part of it and they go to 89 north and then 89 south, 91.
91, yep.
Yeah. Is that gonna cut the traffic down coming into town for the people that run the stores and stuff?
Certainly it could.
You talked about local.
Yeah.
Alternatives. Can you, have you gotten that far? There is a Maple Avenue. Of course, we have the access to the covered bridge going south and through New Hampshire, and going north.
Back Mountain Road.
What?
Back Mountain Road.
Fruitful.
So ultimately, this is a town-owned project and it's up to the town to choose which detour they would like. I mean, things that we've done in the past is we've used that regional interstate detour for truck traffic and then signed a local detour for vehicular traffic. So that might be a way to mitigate business losses or business impacts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that explains a lot.
And I know it was like a week, two week-long periods when you're doing the inspections last year where it was closed, only one lane. But the state did a real good job of putting out the signage, and I think the local business truck traffic, it just meant getting off one exit or the other. We didn't have any problems that I recall of somebody not figuring that out, and then they couldn't go across a covered bridge or a big truck was coming through town. So certainly there's some inconvenience, but we've tried that before. And between 12A on the other side or out this way, there's a number of options for everything that's not a great big truck.
I also came in a tad bit late, so I don't know what I missed. But from gathering what I did here, the project is more in the line of restoration and not replacement.
Yes, so because it's 80% federally funded, there are stipulations associated with that, so we would like to rehabilitate.
Okay.
I mean, as part of that doesn't mean that we can't see what we can do with widening it a little bit. You know, we want to maintain that arch rib, but replacing the deck, we could evaluate, you know, maybe adding a foot. I don't know what's possible at this point, but replacing that deck is on the table, that riding surface that you ride on. So, but yes, rehabilitation ultimately is what we
Is
are aiming
the
towards.
entrance going to be the same, pretty much the same as it is now, when you go on the bridge, if you go off the bridge?
Yes. So the begin and end point of the bridge, I would assume that would,
Wise?
if we widened the bridge, say if we could get another foot, then that approach we would widen as well to match that. Yep.
So just for transparency, I'm the ED at the American Precision Museum. So I've got a lot of questions to ask. First off, is the wall that intersects the bridge. Who's responsible for that?
The wall that abuts right up next to the bridge.
Goes right into the bridge.
So that's a good question. We do have,
Historic element as well.
do you have a picture of it? you think?
Secure wall?
We don't know. That's a big question mark.
So we have a right-of-way section. They'll go out and they'll look at old deeds and they'll make a determination of who owns it. But if it does butt up right against the bridge, it might be something that we want to get access or permanent rights to maintain that wall.
Again, that's something we have to get as part of the historic preservation building.
Is that the southwest corner?
Southwest corner. The next thing is that being on the National Historic Landmark, there's also a historic preservation easement on that property that we'll have to address if you're gonna cut into any of the property. Particularly where it butts into the bridge, right?
Okay.
Because there's also propane tanks underground in that area that we should certainly make sure we address where it is exactly. Because we'll be adding another tank in that area probably around August or September of this year. So that'll have to be, certainly be careful of. I'm concerned about changing the flow of Mill Brook during this project because the river comes right up within inches of the building. And if we start changing the flow of the river, what that could do to the building as well. Another piece of it is traffic. How do we get cars in and out of our building? So I'm hoping that Maple Avenue will be turned into a two-way. Somebody to think about, but if not, we have to really think about what that means to the museum and how we communicate that to visitors, the 7,000 visitors that come from out of the area every year, as well as all the school students and so forth that come to the building during the course of time. I'm happy to hear 2030. Hopefully you'll go out to 2031, 32, would be even better. But that's okay. But because we have a major renovation project that's going to start in September on the building. So we'll be taking up a lot of space and stuff with contractors.
Is that this fall?
This fall,
This fall.
yeah, goes out to bid Friday.
Oh, wow.
So there's some things to worry about in the building. We also are subject to a brownfield project going on, a mitigation project that's somewhere in the loop that we don't have a start or an end date to it, but we have a start, not an end date yet. So again, I'm not sure how all these things are going to kind of hook together. I know they don't always affect the bridge, but it's somehow there's going to be a lot of activity in this little corner for a couple of years, and I think we have to be mindful of that.
It's all stuff we have to,
Think of it.
take into account. Yep.
And I'm involved in the other bridge, of course, Bellas Falls right now.
Okay.
So, so I know exactly what's going on down there as well. Same problems.
Well, thank you. We wrote all those concerns down, so we will be thinking about
Just
those.
Encourage all of this whole project, the museum,
Yeah.
through the whole project, so that we can make accommodations and we can serve our constituents and donors and so forth.
A gentleman in the back, I've seen your hand up a couple times.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the briefing, but is it an absolute given that when we restore the bridge, or is there an option to just knock it down, steel bridge there? 99.8% of the people that have ever crossed that bridge have no idea what's underneath. It's just a bridge.
Yeah, honestly, I think as part of this project, it's going to have to be rehabilitated. I think using federal funds to remove it entirely and put in a conventional steel beam bridge is just not feasible with the federal funds and the permitting.
Judy Hayward with Historic Windsor and the Preservation Education Institute. And I was thrilled to see historical context as your number one item on your list of discussion points. And I would be a strong voice for rehabilitating it, not only because of its uniqueness and it's the last one. It seems like the bridge has some good lessons to teach us. You mentioned a lot of positives about its condition, as well as some of the things that failed. And a lot of preservation work is done to inform other projects throughout the US, and I think this is a good opportunity for that. I came in late because I went to the Welcome Center like everybody else did. And is Wis Janney Elster doing the engineering study, or have they done it? And are you with WJE?
So WJE is a sub to HNTB, who I work for,
Okay.
as well as Angela. And Angela and WJE have worked together on similar type structures elsewhere.
Well, if they've done a study, I'd love to get a look at it. They are probably the top tier of preservation engineering in the United States. And I thank you so much for taking the project seriously and involving a firm of that caliber in your evaluation. And that's hugely important to know. So thank you for that. And if there's anything we can do to support you in your historical research, we're happy to do it. And Steve, I think there's some educational opportunities here as the project
Yes, I
evolves.
believe so.
You know, encouraging young people to understand about bridge engineering. I've seen that done when the Royalton Bridge was done many years back, getting school groups, getting adults talking, you know, planning for a little bit of community education about why we do these things and, you know, why this work is so important. So thanks so much for coming to town and asking for our opinions.
Thank you.
Yeah, since we're talking about a rehab here and not a full rebuild, and we're talking about maybe potentially being able to buy a foot of additional width. I mean, is it totally out of the question to be adding a sidewalk on the other side?
I'm guessing yes. The question, Angela, if you want to weigh in, is it totally out of the question to get enough width to add a sidewalk on the other side of the bridge?
So the arches are working pretty hard right now already. And that is something that we'll look at, or what are some ways we can try and get some more width out or out there? Is it making the new slab thinner but stronger? Or is it, you know, some other methods like Rich said of redistributing the way the load path works? The other constraint on the upstream side is it's going to be tough to get more width on the side of the Precision Museum because of that green apartment building we can see right now. Getting a little bit more width on the downstream side where there isn't a sidewalk is probably where we would have a little bit more room on the right-of-way side. But I think that all has to be studied, and we haven't gotten that far to see what kind of extra capacity the arches can find.
Yes.
The rails that are currently there, the part you do see, that part of it is, I would assume there's some sort of a plan to create something that would be historically somewhere. I know you can't redo the same thing. It's not going to be feasible. It's not the right height. I imagine that's one of your problems. But some kind of a design factor should be, in my mind, taken in consideration that at least it gives the same feel to where it was before. So that, you know, it has the least impact from the, just kind of the appeal of it. It's kind of a neat appeal when you don't see anything like that anywhere else.
So I can say the town is going to have heavy buy-in on what that railing system is going to look like. Yes, it does have to be, you know, a crash tested system. But we have some options that we've used in different areas, and we can show pictures of all those different options to the town so they can choose something that works for you. But yes, you're right. It's not gonna look exactly the same.
Like over the years with different events and studies, the two themes that have come across my office are, if we could get what we want, we would like it to look like it would when it was built in 1930. There are lighting fixtures that were on the bridge, the aesthetics of the railing, thing like that. So that would come through. And, you know, it's been mentioned, I think the bridge is in Tyson, maybe on Tyson Road. Similar thing, bridge with street lamps on it and things like that, a historic look. Those are the comments. The other one is we've done transportation studies, and there is a fair amount of bike traffic, bicycles on Route 5. So it always comes, well, how much would it cost to allow for, you know, more access for bikes? But that is a comment that has come up in a number of our transportation studies here.
Just a follow-up question. So there's heavy bike traffic. What about pedestrian traffic? How would you characterize that?
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know about heavy in that people do walk. They go there. There's a loop there, and there's a lot of neighborhoods up there and people come along, like there needs to be a sidewalk for sure. On the south side, there's not a connecting sidewalk past Lowell Street. So that kind of ends, but when you go north, it connects with our main street, you know, all the businesses, and then up to the town hall and the school and all that kind of stuff.
Does the town have plans for connecting sidewalks?
Not at this point.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
So as we get closer, I've been through this once before and it gets down to the when's it going to be closed and how long is it going to be closed. The amount of time from the time that decision is made to when the construction starts so that we can do the appropriate planning. Somebody mentioned changing a one-way street to a two-way street, things like that. All of that takes a lot of time and communication and that kind of stuff. But what would be a typical window of that kind of communication when construction would start?
Yeah, so we would know the fall beforehand. So the fall beforehand is when we would send this contract out to a contractor and get somebody on board for the following summer. Prior to the start of construction, we would have a pre-construction meeting that the town would be, or pre-closure meeting that the town would be invited to. You know, if we know that it's going to be closed for an entire construction season, then that prior fall, you'll know, okay, April 15th, let's just expect a closure.
Okay.
Depending on the alternatives that we lay out in the scoping report, maybe there's alternatives that have, you know, maybe just a 60-day closure. So as we move further into design, we'll get a better idea of that.
Is there typically any need for like local traffic control emergency services that all run through the contractor? So our police, fire, highway departments will be aware, but not necessarily relied on to provide those kind of things when you write the specs for the bid.
I'll have to get back to you on that. So typically on town highway bridge projects, it is up to the town for maintaining detour routes and providing enforcement. But the one stipulation of that is if it's a class 1 route, which I believe this is. So if it is a class 1 route, then it's on the state to provide enforcement and sign the detours.
Always glad to help, but limited staffing, you know, and it's a.
Yeah, I do
Long
believe
project.
this is a class 1.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. Any other questions while we're here? Okay, well, this has been great. I've heard a lot of great feedback. We've taken down a lot of notes about what we've heard tonight. You should be expecting to see us probably late summer or the fall. We'll have a scoping report to present to the town. And then we'll make some decisions from there.
Very good. Does anybody know what that bridge replaced?
I don't.
Okay.
That'd be a Kyle question.
1933.
Yeah, I just, what was there before?
Oh.
A rope swing or?
Yeah.
Something that.
It went away on the 27th.
Yeah, something that the floodway.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
an event took one out. It's pretty challenging. Like you say, most people don't know what it looks like underneath there, but.
It's hard to get to.
Yeah.
Logistics of the crew getting in there to do any significant work.
I think Gary Milet painted. I think I have a vague recollection. Does that sound familiar to you? Yeah, I think he did. I hope I'm not conflating it, but I'll see if I can find a copy of that image. Gary's a local artist who of Summer Now. He does portraits and
1846.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm not hearing anything else.
Thank you.
Thanks.